Have you ever watched a badge try to write the story only for truth to flip the page? In Atlanta's Fulton County Courthouse, Officer Cole Ramsey's guiding shove turned into a kick. The benches gasped. A mother clutched her child. The court reporter froze mid-stroke. Marcus Avery did not flinch. Shoulders squared, breath steady, he faced the bench instead of the boot. His calm was louder than Ramsey's arrogance. Judge Mara Ellison's voice cut the air. "Officer, this is my court. One more breach and you're out." Before the murmur could fade, Clerk Rivera stepped forward with a sealed envelope, chain of custody stapled to the front, timestamp clear, logged before the docket, unopened until the judge allowed it. It lay heavy on the bench like an unlit fuse. Ramsey smirked. Certain silence meant permission. Marcus stood without apology, a man trained to let evidence speak louder than anger. The room leaned toward the envelope, curious yet unsure. Before we continue, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and comment the city you're watching from. It helps us bring more real stories like this one. The gavel tapped once. The whisper of paper settled into silence. In that pause, the courtroom shifted. Every eye moved from Ramsey's swagger to the envelope's promise. Justice had not spoken yet, but the weight of it pressed down on every seat. The gallery whispered in waves after the judge's warning, but Ramsey didn't retreat. He leaned close enough for his words to carry. "He's just security, nothing more." It wasn't said for Marcus, it was planted for the crowd, the kind of seed arrogance waters with a smirk. Marcus remained still. His jaw stayed unclenched, his hands open. The room saw only silence, but silence was his discipline. His breath came slow, like someone trained to steady aim when others tremble. He gave no fuel to the fire, and that absence unsettled Ramsey more than protest ever could. Across the aisle, Ada Jonah Price studied his tablet. The name he had just heard, Marcus Avery, was not ordinary. Price scrolled, lips tightening as service records and commendations flashed back in memory. He knew that name, and if the documents matched, this was no security guard. This was a Marine who had stood where fear breaks other men. The gallery, blind to context, tilted toward the uniform it trusted. Shoulders leaned in Ramsey's direction, not because they knew him, but because performance speaks louder than patience. Judge Ellison, however, did not move with the crowd. Her stare cut sharper now, as if she too felt the weight of that sealed envelope pressing against the table. Ramsey straightened, tugged at his belt, as if to remind everyone of the badge at his side. Marcus did not budge, and in the space between them, the court seemed to hold its breath. Then Price rose. His voice was level, but his words made the benches shift. "Your Honor, I request permission to supplement the record. The sealed documents relate directly to the credibility of this proceeding." The judge tapped her pen once, eyes unreadable. Ramsey sneered. Marcus breathed. The room tilted again. Clerk Rivera rose from his station, the envelope in hand, his voice even and deliberate. "This document was delivered at 7:43 this morning. Logged, sealed, time-stamped, and placed under secure hold until the court's discretion permitted its opening." The benches shifted uneasily. A few leaned forward, trying to catch a glimpse of the plain, wax-sealed packet. It wasn't the look of drama, it was the look of weight. Paper can seem heavier than steel when truth has been folded into it. Nia Brooks, a community advocate with a presence that carried quiet authority, asked recognition from the bench. Judge Ellison inclined her head. "Your Honor, this is not the first complaint tied to Officer Ramsey. Public records list prior incidents, excessive force reports, dismissed grievances, settlements filed under this very jurisdiction." Her tone wasn't sharp. It was factual, restrained, and all the more cutting because of it. Murmurs broke like wind in the gallery. Not everyone wanted to believe it, but doubt had already taken root. Ramsey's jaw flexed as he muttered, "Nobody. That's all he is, a nobody." His words weren't meant for the judge. They were meant for anyone in earshot who might still be persuaded by swagger. But Marcus Avery stood still, eyes steady, posture unbent. He did not raise a hand, did not correct the lie. The discipline of silence carried its own verdict. Judge Ellison adjusted her glasses, her gaze firm and unsparing. "Clerk Rivera, bring the envelope forward." The scrape of shoes on the floor echoed through the chamber as the packet crossed the space between secrecy and revelation. The gavel tapped once. not as a conclusion, but as a signal. The room froze. Whispers died, every eye fixed on the seam that had not yet been broken. The truth was about to step forward, and the balance of the entire proceeding leaned toward it. Rivera's hands were steady as he broke the wax seal and slid the packet free. Pages whispered against each other, crisp and official. He read the header aloud: United States Marine Corps Record of Service, Marcus D. Avery. A ripple moved through the gallery recognition without words. The list began: deployments across 3 continents, service in combat zones where silence meant survival, leadership rotations where judgment carried lives, commendations for valor issued not once but 3 times. Each citation was clear, the language stamped with formality: extraordinary courage under fire, command presence in hostile conditions, exceptional restraint where escalation was expected. The benches fell into stillness. No coughs, no whispers, no shifting feet. Even the ceiling fans seemed to mute. Ramsey's smirk faltered, but he forced his arms to cross, posture daring the room to look away from him. Yet no one did. All eyes had turned toward the man he had just kicked. Marcus gave only a single nod when asked to confirm the record. No speech, no boast, just acknowledgement that the words matched the truth of his life. His silence was heavier than testimony. Judge Ellison leaned forward. Officer Ramsey, explain to this court why you physically struck a man who stood compliant before you. The room tightened, waiting for apology, for contrition, for anything resembling humility. Ramsey rolled his shoulders and let the words drop. Irrelevant to today's case. He's ordinary. Courtrooms see ordinary men every day. But ordinary men do not carry commendations sealed in government files. Ordinary men are not named in letters of restraint where violence was expected. Ordinary men are not read into the record as leaders under fire. And the gallery knew it. You could see the change in posture: backs straightened, heads lifted, silence turning into recognition. The judge's gavel tapped once, low and sharp. The sound wasn't just order, it was foreshadowing. Something in the balance had shifted, and the weight no longer leaned where arrogance had planted itself. The silence after Ramsey's shrug was jagged, like glass underfoot. Ada Jonah Price rose, his voice crisp but edged with disbelief. Your Honor, credentials are never irrelevant. They bear directly on credibility, on character, and on the legitimacy of any testimony given in this chamber. To dismiss them is to dismiss truth itself. Judge Ellison inclined her head, inviting more. Price continued, citing precedents where service records had been used to weigh integrity in both testimony and sentencing. The law does not ignore what a person has endured, nor what discipline they have carried into civic life. His words moved like a tide, calm, unhurried, but unstoppable. Nia Brooks stood next, her presence steady. The community has long questioned Officer Ramsey's pattern of conduct: excessive force complaints, harassment filings, settlements tucked quietly away. These, too, are part of the record, part of what today represents. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The facts themselves carried the sting. The gallery shifted again, whispers threading through disbelief and dawning recognition. Some who had leaned instinctively toward the badge now sat back, uneasy. Truth was no longer one man's claim, it was paperwork, precedent, and patterns. Judge Ellison opened a leather-bound volume on her desk and read aloud from Fulton County's courtroom rules. Respect is not optional. Decorum is not decoration. Force is not performance. This chamber is not a theater for arrogance. Each line rang with authority. The gavel tapped once, marking the words as binding, not ornamental. Ramsey scoffed, but the sound was thin, hollow. His arms folded tighter across his chest. He tried to laugh, muttering, "He thinks he's special," but no one laughed with him. The room had moved, and arrogance, when isolated, is quieter than it pretends to be. Ellison's eyes narrowed, the pen in her hand resting just above the sanction ledger. "Officer Ramsey," she said evenly, "the court is considering immediate action for contempt." The gallery held its breath. Marcus remained still. Rivera set the file down with care. Price and Brooks exchanged a glance, each knowing the moment had finally shifted into decision. The chamber held its breath as Clerk Rivera opened a second folder sealed within the packet. This one bore the letterhead of the Marine Corps Command. His voice did not rise, he simply read, To whom it may concern, Marcus D. Avery served with distinction under my direct command. His leadership in combat and his restraint under provocation are without question. He protected those who could not protect themselves. A not rhyme, with mind. Every syllable carried the weight of a witness who was not in the room, but whose authority could not be doubted. Rivera placed a small audio recorder on the desk. With Judge Ellison's nod, he pressed play. A commanding officer's voice filled the courtroom. Avery was the one we trusted when chaos broke loose. Where others leaned on force, he leaned on discipline. That is why men returned home who otherwise would not have. The benches leaned forward, not to doubt, but to absorb. Even those who had whispered skepticism earlier now sat in reverent silence. Some heads bowed, others straightened. The atmosphere no longer bent toward Ramsey's smirk, it had turned. Ramsey tried to laugh, a brittle sound that broke in the middle. So what? A letter? A tape? Doesn't change today? But his words sounded more like a plea than a boast. His swagger had thinned, and the gallery could feel it. Judge Ellison removed her glasses, folded them carefully, and set them on the bench. This court will recess for 10 minutes. During that time, I will review appropriate disciplinary actions. Officer Ramsey, remain where you are. Mr. Avery, thank you for your composure. The gavel struck once. Its echo rolled across the chamber like thunder trapped indoors. People exhaled only after the judge stood. For the first time that morning, the air belonged to Marcus, not to arrogance. Marcus inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement, not triumph. He had learned long ago that real victories are quiet. The gallery shifted, sensing the tide had already turned, though the ruling had not yet been spoken. The gavel fell again, calling the court back from recess. When Judge Mara Ellison returned to the bench, her posture carried the gravity of decision. The gallery hushed before she spoke. Even Ramsey, arms folded tight across his chest, leaned just slightly forward, as if bracing for a blow he could no longer dodge. This court has reviewed the record, the evidence presented, and the conduct witnessed here today. Her tone was even, but its weight pressed down on every seat. Officer Cole Ramsey is hereby censured for contempt in open court. Effective immediately, you are suspended from duty, pending an internal affairs investigation. You will surrender your service weapon and badge to your supervisor before leaving this courthouse. The words landed harder than any shove. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt, not from chaos, but from balance being restored. The badge on Ramsey's chest was no longer armor, it was a burden about to be lifted away. Ramsey shot to his feet, sputtering. You can't, this isn't. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering, but the judge raised a hand. Officer, this is not a debate, this is an order. You may appeal through the proper channels, but until then, you do not serve in uniform. The gallery exhaled like a single breath released after hours of restraint. Shoulders dropped, eyes widened, and a ripple of quiet relief moved through the benches. Pride did not shout. It stood in silence, filling the room with something larger than itself. Marcus did not gloat. He remained steady, gaze forward, posture unchanged. His strength was not in victory, but in discipline. And that restraint drew more respect than any raised voice could have. ADA Price rose again, seizing the moment. Your Honor, given the credibility concerns, I request a review of Officer Ramsey's prior cases. Patterns of misconduct may extend further than today. The gallery stirred. Accountability had moved from one incident to the possibility of many. Judge Ellison adjusted the papers before her, scanning the ADA's motion. The courtroom waited, still enough that the creak of the bench beneath her seemed loud. Finally, she spoke. The objection is overruled. This court will forward today's record to Internal Affairs, as well as the Fulton County Civilian Oversight Board, for review of related cases involving Officer Ramsey. The words rolled through the chamber with the weight of permanence. This was no longer about one kick, one insult, one moment of arrogance. It was about a pattern, and patterns demand scrutiny. Public Advocate Nia Brooks rose once more, her voice carrying the steadiness of resolve. For the record, Your Honor, a hotline has been established for sworn statements. Community members with credible accounts will be encouraged to testify under oath. Justice demands not only review, but testimony. A murmur of agreement rippled through the gallery. People shifted, exchanging looks that carried both memory and relief. For some, the possibility of their own ignored complaints now felt like they might finally be heard. Ramsey sat rigid, his jaw tight, his fists clenching and unclenching. His uniform, once a symbol of confidence, now looked heavy on his shoulders. Then Marcus spoke for the first time. His voice was calm, steady, and clear. "Respect isn't begged, it's proven." The words cut through the silence with more weight than a shout ever could. He did not raise them to indict, only to remind. Judge Ellison inclined her head, the subtle gesture of a jurist who agreed without commentary. For a moment, her eyes softened, not with sympathy, but with recognition. The court shifted again. The air carried not just justice served, but justice extending outward, moving beyond one man to touch an entire system. The silence after Marcus's words lingered long enough for every person to feel their weight. Judge Ellison set her pen down, inviting him to continue. For the first time, Marcus turned toward the bench, not with anger, but with clarity. "Your Honor," he began, voice steady. "This is not about me walking away respected. It is about making sure no one else is disrespected like this again. I am not asking for revenge. I am asking for reform." The benches leaned closer. His tone was measured, deliberate, but each sentence struck like a bell. "Require every officer who steps into this chamber to complete de-escalation training. Make courtroom conduct a module, not a suggestion. And when an officer crosses the line, let there be a public apology protocol, not for the sake of humiliation, but for the sake of dignity." People in the gallery shifted, not with restlessness, but with recognition. Heads nodded. Some eyes brimmed with quiet approval. The Marine who had been kicked did not answer with fists or fury, but with discipline and demands for something better. Ramsey sat stone still, his jaw locked. His earlier smirk had collapsed into silence, the kind of silence that grows when arrogance is finally outmatched. Judge Ellison's gavel tapped once, her voice formal but edged with respect. "This court will append to its order a recommendation for remedial training protocols and public apology procedures to be reviewed by the Oversight Board." A rustle of movement swept through the gallery. A few stood not clapping, not shouting, just standing as if to mark the moment with their own quiet respect. When Judge Ellison returned to the bench with her written order, the gallery leaned in as if the parchment itself carried a pulse. She read each line aloud, voice steady, final. "This court hereby records its censure of Officer Cole Ramsey for contemptuous conduct committed in full view of this chamber. Effective immediately, he is suspended from duty pending a full internal affairs investigation and review by the Fulton County Civilian Oversight Board. Further, the court recommends remedial de-escalation training, courtroom conduct instruction, and the establishment of public apology protocols in cases of misconduct." The gavel struck once, the sound sharp and undeniable. What had begun as arrogance performed in front of a crowd had ended as accountability etched into the record. Ramsey's face drained of its bravado. His badge, once gleaming with authority, now looked like a relic stripped of meaning. His lawyer whispered, but the room's focus had already shifted away from him. Arrogance had been isolated, and isolation left him small. Marcus Avery stood in silence, shoulders squared not in defiance but in dignity. He had said what needed to be said, and now the record carried it forward. Judge Ellison's eyes met his, a brief acknowledgement, two people bound by discipline in different uniforms. The gallery exhaled again, but this time it was not tension leaving the body. It was relief, respect, and recognition. Some wiped their eyes, others clasped hands. The room had grown taller than it had been that morning. The narrator's voice settled like the moral of a fable. Power that humiliates is counterfeit. Power that protects is real. True strength does not need to kick down. It stands tall until truth rises. Before you leave, make sure you like this video, subscribe for more stories that reveal truth in unexpected places, and comment the city you're watching from. Your voice matters in keeping these stories alive. Marcus turned, walking out without triumph, without bitterness, just quiet strength. And the courtroom, for once, followed his lead.